thank you. So first up, a tiny little bit on the prevention demonstrator. So this is an agreement between Greater Manchester, struck by Mayor Andy Burnham and government, for Greater Manchester to take on a responsibility of being the first national prevention demonstrator for the UK. The premise for that discussion was an acknowledgement that we are facing declining outcomes for residents, increasing costs for public services associated with rising demand, which is often characterised more as crisis and reactive demand than preemptive and requested support. That is getting to a level that not only is keeping kind of public service organisations and ministers awake at night, but is actually starting to significantly undermine the confidence that the public has in their public services. So there has to be a different way out of that. That is a fundamental shift from fragmented, siloed, reactive public services into services and patterns and networks of support that are more community rooted, more alert, more agile, more preemptive. And our task as the prevention demonstrator is to both kind of blueprint how that approach occurs, and we're describing that entire shift to a community-rooted model as Live Well in Greater Manchester, which means everyday support in every neighbourhood, organised according to kind of Marmot-type principles of proportionate universalism. Really important to keep the universal interest in public service. That's what sustains public confidence. But recognise that we will be reversing past decades of appalling practice as we do that, where services aren't responsive to what the public actually want and are designed according to what services and professionals need rather than what they should be doing. So our task is to blueprint what that change looks like to a model for Live Well, and evaluate that change and demonstrate that it's both better to work in that system as a frontline practitioner, better to experience that pattern of support as a resident, and it's better for the public purse. So I think the thing that stands out is the fact that I don't think we can adjust or moderate the system that we operate in order to get to the end stage that we're looking for. I don't think this is a kind of correction to existing procurement practices. I don't think this is a correction of existing methods for pooling resources, managing processes of investment in new service models, and then managing the benefits realisation. I think there is a more fundamental shift that is required, which is a kind of prompt for design that starts with listening to communities in the first instance, and then starts to come up with entirely different methods of establishing and operating networks of support and service delivery that I don't think we've ever really been able to procure or to fund in the past. So I think there's something about the kind of openness of that approach. There is something that I think needs to recognise this isn't something that can then sit on top of a system that doesn't change. So we have to be targeting mainstream resource and mainstream change, including with mainstream practitioners, to get past the reality that we don't spend the total public resource in a way that's remotely optimal at the moment, and we are spending money on helping people navigate a broken system rather than fixing the system. So I think this is something which is a bit more fundamental about how you construct new partnerships and collaborations for delivering improved public services and support to residents. And I don't think yet we've discovered the methods and models for that to be applied effectively.
Well, hopefully there might be a few ideas coming out of the discussions that we've been having today, where we've been looking at a range of different service areas, and we're going to be pulling those together in a report after this event. What I'd like to do now is ask a couple of people who've been involved in the conversations from a commissioner's perspective and a social enterprise perspective. What are the things that have stood out from today? So perhaps Grace first.
Thanks, Jonathan. So it probably sounds silly saying it because we all know it to be so important, but I don't think we can overemphasise the importance of partnership, and as early as possible that kept coming through on our table. So not coming up with an idea and then going out and saying, social enterprises, what do you think about this? You know, from the very beginning, at the point you've just got a problem statement, a challenge, or if you're more strength-based and you're thinking an opportunity, because every challenge is an opportunity, sitting around the table with partners, social enterprises, funders, people who have walked some or all of the path that you're now thinking about walking, and we talked about how working together in partnership actually just expedites the time frames and maximises the benefits you can achieve. We talked about, we had some social enterprises on our table who were doing things because they were doing them, and actually in my example, and I'm allowed to say this because I work for a local authority, if the local authority had been part of that journey at the beginning, actually it would have helped the social enterprise deliver on a thing that the local authority wanted anyway. So that's not to be underestimated, and what I was really given comfort by is we're all here to deliver good outcomes. We're in our case for the children we support, but appreciate we're talking about generally just residents and our local communities. And if you can unlock that, you know, and all get on board on the same purpose, then I really got the sense that things which normally hold us back, and what we feel are rules and everything comes with strings attached, actually those barriers don't fall away, they still exist, but they feel much more navigable. Like I was sat there with a real thought that we actually really can deliver in some of the most challenging situations. So partnership and as early as possible, and that people who are bought into your purpose and have the same values as you will stick with you through that journey, and actually it's okay to lose people along the way because they're not the right people and it's not the right time. And actually I think that will avoid some of the procurement challenges often in local authorities we come across, because you might find there's only 1 or 2 people left. You know, privileged is the person that finds themselves in a room with 10 social enterprises all ready to go on the same day. I just don't think that's a problem. Like, if you have that problem, Swindon would like more social enterprises, right? So I think working through the journey with a really clear purpose, with the right people, the right organisations, as early as possible will enable you to unlock so many benefits. So I was really inspired by the table, so thank you to everyone who I've spent the day with today.
Thank you. Gemma.
Thank you. So I've been sat around the table with Thameside Local Authority, and we've been talking about children in care and the lack of provision and that transition when they kind of turn 18. And I'll be really blunt now. What's clear is the system is broken and we're being shafted by private providers for thousands and thousands of pounds a week. And that just doesn't make any sense to me at all. So the area feels regulated and unregulated. So Ofsted are trying to do a job and try and make things better, but haven't got the capacity to regulate this. So it's still letting these providers through. We've got lots of out-of-borough placements. We've got provision in the area that we don't know about, but we're still responsible for these young people. So there's massive challenges for the local authority. In terms of solutions, we've talked about lots of different ways of partnership again, around how we can develop relationships with trusted providers that we can partner with and come up with like bespoke solutions and deliver a pathway. But what we talked about from a provider's point of view is that providers need stability. They don't want to do spot purchase contracts, they need block contracts, and they will work in partnership with the local authority, do open book accounting. They might want to make a small surplus, but we're not looking to make the profits of what the private people are. And actually, we deliver a lot better outcomes. So we talked about how we could get around procurement and lots of different ways around that. One provider, I'm shocked by this, gets £25,000 a week to deliver to support one young person. If we didn't pay that and we saved up for 8 weeks, we could buy a property. And we did that again. In every 8 weeks, we could buy a property, and that would start to solve some of these issues and find brilliant places to live. But we've got to, it's already broken, we've got to break it again, do a pilot project, test a theory, work with some trusted providers, and kind of try and break the system and start again. I think that the Better Futures Fund might be a really good opportunity to pilot something and test something. So I've learned quite a lot today, sat around the table. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's this bold commissioner thing. It takes someone bold to kind of say, I'm going to try something different and find a provider that they can work with to test it. And if it goes wrong, tweak it and make it work. But it's got to save money, it's got to give better outcomes than what we're getting. Very interesting.
Great. Before I come back to our panellists, it'd be really interesting to hear from some of the tables. I want to return to our panellists now. And Warren, we've heard the Better Futures Fund mentioned a couple of times, and the role of social investment in different ways. And I wondered, in terms of your work, how you see the role of social investment in being able to scale some of the different ways of doing things within the system here.
Yeah, I was really struck by that, the comment around being challenged on leveraging Better Futures Fund, because that really made me think, because I think that's actually quite radical, isn't it? Approaching something like that, where people just thinking there's an allocation on its way, and the job is to kind of spend against the allocation, rather than unlocking something that might grow its impact and benefit. So it made me think about the importance of things like kind of mission-led approaches that are setting a kind of positive frame for something extraordinary to happen, and then leaving the pitch open for more participation and more contribution. So actually it's not just the Better Futures Fund, actually it's thinking about leveraging public service spend for positive objectives more broadly. And I think that plays into that theme from today around a shift from procurement, which is restricted and capped, to collaboration, which is open and potentially means that capacity and resource is abundant. And I think that's the way to bring, one of the things that often concerns me, I think if you bring social investment in that way, where it's complementary and supplementary, and its own contribution is leveraged by public resource as well, and you're attaching that in a way that is leading for a kind of, on a mission for, I don't know, young people to leave formal education with a sense of hope and a clear line of sight to whatever's next for them in terms of education or careers, and understand and then unlock who might be a participant and a contributor to that. I could see a really positive path for social investment that could really start to establish and fuel network models of delivery. I think one of the things I'm always kind of cautious about is seeing social investment as a kind of replacement for public service and public service investment not changing. So actually it just sits on top of an unreformed system. And I think we've got a lot of examples of where the evaluation has demonstrated it's had a positive impact, but it's never been able to crack through the crust of the mainstream public service system. And I think that was the kind of the story that was coming out, well, a number of tables actually, but definitely coming out of the Manchester table, thinking how do you infect the mainstream as part of this. So I think there's definitely a role there, but I think we've got to make sure that we're cautious not to use traditional approaches to kettle and cap it in a way that can't maximise its impact.
Thank you. Just kind of picking up on that social investment piece, I know, Gemma, you've got a lot of experience at P3 of leveraging social investment. I can spot Peter Morris there in the back from Social and Sustainable Capital. It'd be great to get your views on how social investment can really support doing things quite differently.
Thank you. P3 has delivered 4 social impact bonds delivering outcomes, 2 working with young people and the other 2 working with people that were sleeping on the streets and quite entrenched. All of them quite difficult programmes to deliver, loads of challenges, but loads of really positive outcomes. In terms of the social investment model and governance and setup, we were rubbish the first time round. And we got better and better on each one because it doesn't have to be that complicated. And I think if we can find commissioners that can understand how it works, buy into the model, understand and work in partnership with that, I think it's win-win for everybody. So I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing what the outcomes are and what this programme looks like in the summer. In terms of other social investment, we've really kind of harnessed it at P3 to buy properties. So we've worked with social and sustainable capital and borrowed quite a lot. It's in the 10 or 11 million, I think. Getting a nod at the back there. And that's allowed us to purchase properties in areas that were working, to replace some of our stock that wasn't good enough, or just to kind of add value. It's all move on accommodation for where we're already working. So we're not general needs. We're not just getting property for the sake of it. We're not rent farming. We just want to provide really good accommodation. So it's really helped P3 grow to deliver better outcomes in the areas that we're working. So yes, get social investment. It's great.
And I suppose from your perspective as a commissioner, do you have any examples where social investment has made a difference, or areas where it could make a difference in Swindon?
It absolutely can make a difference in Swindon. We talked a lot on our table about diversity of funding and how you could potentially have, to your point, some local authority funding, some social investment funding, so that you don't end up in a situation where you're subsidising one or the other or plugging gaps. I think we need to be honest about, sometimes we're, particularly with the children's tables, these are statutory duties we need to be delivering, and there is a lot of money in the system. To your point, how are we rediverting where we're spending quite high sums of money, not necessarily getting the right outcomes, and then how do we potentially work with social investors to enable more social enterprises to come into the market? In Swindon there aren't any social enterprises running children's home, and we're really, really keen for that to be different. I think for a market to be an effective market, you need a diversity of provision, and you can't just have everybody running private provision, and I don't have anything against private providers. You have some providers running really lovely family-owned children's homes, and that's wonderful. And it's about the ethics and the values and delivering the right thing. So I think social investment absolutely has a role to play, and I think commissioners, myself included, there's always more to learn, need to spend more time thinking about what does social investment look like. How do we get away from the local authority as just buying things? Well, I'm sorry, but just buying things isn't going to fix any of our problems. How are we working, back to the partnership point, how are we working in partnership with social investors and social enterprises to make a difference? And sometimes, there's different limits with, your funding. Social investment funds sometimes need to be secured, sometimes they can be unsecured, so there's practicalities, and if we're honest about what some of those barriers and some of those opportunities are, I think we can do more if we do it together. So yeah, there is a role to play, but it can't cover up the gaps of some of the other problems in the system. But how do we use it to get more done? Let's get more done together. I think that's the real opportunity.
Great. Well, I'd like to come back to you, Warren, and just really from, obviously you weren't able to be with us the whole day, you've been very busy. We're very, very glad that you were able to kind of join us when you have. But from what you've heard and from the feedback that you had from Sandra, from that group's discussion, what's the kind of one thing that you could take back as a contribution to the demonstrator work from the discussions we've been having today?
Like two things then.
You're allowed to.
Oh,
Three.
All right. Well, I think there is definitely something about the kind of practical methods for moving from that, kind of procurement to partnerships and collaboration, and understanding the kind of conditions where that might thrive. I think there is a real the thing I'm really, really keen to kind of pursue from this is the kind of the total model of social investment that starts to describe the full economic deal flow, because I think there's something that allows a kind of a cyclical benefit to come from a full understanding of the economic deal flow. So social investment delivered with an impact, understanding then where the dividend falls, being able to construct a collaboration or a partnership that captures the dividend, and uses it to grow the potential of the model that was initiated through the social investment. So it's not sustaining the model that the social investment was set up to establish at that level. It's fundamentally changing the system and starting to consume the resources that were spent on extractive practices that weren't actually serving anybody particularly well. So I think there's a real stretch on the social investment model into full economic deal flow that I'm not sure we've cracked yet. But I think there will be some insight and intelligence in the room that I'd be really keen to kind of follow up on if we've got some examples of that being completed.
Thank you, Warren. And for you other two, what would you take away from today now?
I'm glad I've got a long drive home because there's quite a lot to digest from today and to theme it up. But there is a wealth of knowledge and experience in the room. So it's how do I tap into that informally, and we work together into it. But also there's opportunities to work regionally. And I said I've been on the Bradford table all day. It's a shame Bradford isn't close to Swindon because we've got very similar problems and very similar opportunities. So my takeaway is partnership. It's about also being more innovative when it comes to how we achieve partnership and not getting locked into set tender processes. And I'm really excited Stone King are coming to Swindon to help us work through that. So yeah, definitely lots of specific follow-ups, but broader than that, I've got about 20 pages of notes here that I'm looking forward to digesting and making some more sense of in the morning.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I said around the table is where I feel like P3 have made the most impact and done something different and innovation is where there's been somebody on the other side of the commissioning table who's dared to make a move and do something different. And it's always been around key individuals that have just said, I'll find a way to make this work. And without that one person, some of the things wouldn't happen. So we now own 80 properties in Gainsborough and have got like a really community project there. That wouldn't have happened if we hadn't come to one of these events. And there was a lady called Eve who made that happen. And P3 were responsive back and did that. So I think we can describe a problem, but sometimes it's just like somebody's got to make the move. And where we've got a fund where it's about innovation and outcomes, we really need to embrace it and pilot some stuff and try some stuff and use it, because if not, we'll just be stuck in the same model. But I think we've come up with some brilliant ideas today, so I'm excited about it.
So that's great. So I would like to thank our three panellists. Big round of applause.